So if you've ever watched people play fighting games at a higher level, I'm sure you've had a couple of questions bounce around in your head. Some of those questions being, well, how are they doing all that? Or, I didn't even think any of that was possible. And probably a lot of the time, why are they just spamming the same move? And to the uninitiated, I'm sure a lot of these questions make a lot of sense to ask, however, the answers you get might not be exactly what you're looking for. For example, take the game Super Smash Bros. Melee. I'm sure a lot of people have probably played this game when they were younger, but at the higher levels, the things that some of these players are doing are so far beyond that of people at lower skill levels that those same questions from earlier are being asked. And if you ever wanted to get into fighting games at some point, but seeing all those techniques and intricacies has probably intimidated you, I'm here to tell you that that's completely normal, because even the people you see doing all those crazy things have been in the same boat that you're in. And with that, I want to transition into Dragon Ball. Now, if you don't know what Dragon Ball is, then really all I have to say is that the rock you must live under must be really nice, so say hi to Patrick Star for me. But I'll explain. The series follows the character Goku and his friends as they go and fight these near-world ending events that happen probably every 3 to 5 days, and in the later series it's gotta be maybe every 2 to 3 days. But for the purposes of this video, we're gonna focus on his son, Gohan. And when we first meet Gohan, he has to be no older than 5. He's just a little kid, but due to the company that he's surrounded by, he's been forced into combat more times than I can count, and because of that, it's forced him to grow and mature on the battlefield. Personally, I believe that there is a link between fighting game player experience and Gohan's fighting experience, and by the end of this video, I hope you understand that they're a lot closer than a lot of people will think. And I hope by the end of this, you'll be wanting to try fighting games for yourself, and maybe you'll understand that they're not as hard as a lot of people think they are. Or maybe at some point you dabbled into fighting games a little bit and decided that you just weren't that good enough. Either way, my goal is to convey the various ups and downs you may have on your path for improvement on your fighting game journey. And with that, this is Fighting Games and You. So when you first start playing fighting games, obviously you're not going to know what to do, so naturally you're just going to button mash. As a kid, I was a prime button masher, because the idea of a combo or tech was far beyond me and I'd never heard of it, so realistically, I didn't have to worry about it. And I'm sure for you, it's probably the same. Combo? What, like the chips? Tech? Like technology? For Gohan around this age, he actually had no fights under his belt whatsoever, simply because at the time there was no real threats for him to have to fight. But, like the Fire Nation, the Saiyans attacked. And once the attack of the Saiyans was underway, he was forced to train with Piccolo. For the player, at this point, you might probably still be playing at like a party or just some, button mashing with the homies, and then it happens.
Say goodbye! I'll erase you completely! You didn't think this through.
You stop hurting my daddy!
You experienced that first real spark. Even if it was in a casual setting with friends, something inside of you kind of flipped and you thought to yourself, whoa, that was kind of cool. And I think I want to do it again. Now, if you decide that you really do want to try and do that stuff again, then at this point you have to take the path of most resistance. And while that might sound scary, you just have to understand that most fighting games to get into, if you've never played a fighting game, it's not going to be the easiest thing, but you also can't get caught in the mental trap of believing it's going to be extremely easy or extremely hard. Fast forward some weeks later and you find yourself a main, you got yourself a nice setup going, things are looking pretty nice. And similar to Gohan's training arc, you kind of went on one yourself too. You got your buttons down, your little bread and butter combos, the little basics about your character. You're not too skilled, but you at least know the basics. However, there's going to come a moment where you're going to have to put all that to good use, and similar to Gohan, he was feeling pretty confident in his skills after his training with Piccolo, but when it came down to it, he eventually got bodied. Maybe it's at a local event, or maybe it's just with friends and everyone else decided to get into the game too, but you get bodied. And it might be a hard pill to swallow, but you have to understand that you cannot win them all. But even if that's the case, even if you do get bodied, you shouldn't let it get you down too bad, because listen, not even the pros can win all the time, and they're professionals, Gohan tried to the best of his abilities, but he still got beat pretty bad. But again, he still tried, and Goku and Piccolo were extremely proud of him. And honestly, you should feel pretty proud of yourself too, because at the end of the day, you still tried your absolute best. And maybe your best just wasn't enough, but at least you know, in comparison to how you were a couple weeks ago, you're doing better. And that's all you should be focusing on, is being better than you were before. Naturally, as you start to play more and more, your skills over time become a lot better, and while you might not see it, it's very apparent in the gameplay. What I mean by that is, when you hold yourself up to how you used to be, obviously you're a lot better, but you're not going to notice it right away. There's going to be some things that just come naturally to you because, well, it's just what you're used to in the game. If you were to go back to any of those parties that you were at beforehand and you started playing people there, you'd probably be the king of the hill, and maybe even you might get someone started on their fighting game journey. Who knows? Even if you need a small confidence boost or just a little reminder of where you stand, it's always a good idea to go back and look at your replays. Let's not forget, Gohan, to some degree, he did want to be a scholar, so it's always good to study up on your gameplay. Trust me when I tell you that looking at your replays, whether it be wins or losses, can be really empowering simply for the fact that you can actually see your growth. And if you're one of those people that need like a reminder of why you're going or some kind of validation, those replays are exactly that. They tell you exactly what your bad habits are, what your good habits are, what you're good at, what you need to work on. It tells you everything, but you just need to have an eye for it. And while you may not have that eye exactly, or maybe it's just a little open, a little closed, you still have it. And as long as you keep up with that, you will get so much better at noticing the things that you can do and the things that you can't do. Your entire gameplay starts to shift. You may not feel it in that moment, but as time goes on, it just occurs naturally. In a way, it kind of clicks. For some people in the friend group, maybe it does click, and for some others, perhaps it doesn't. For you, I would say at this point, you'd probably be somewhere around the middle. Some of the stuff you understand and you're able to pull off, but there are some other techniques that you're quite not sure on how to do, but you understand them, you're just not able to do them. You in this situation are Gohan, and the people around you are maybe your friend group or maybe people at your local, but those people represent other Z fighters on your journey too. Let's say you have a friend and he kind of reminds you of Krillin. He's not the best, but at the same time, he's not the worst either. He understands the game in and out, he gets the basics and he gets the advanced techniques, but there's still some tech he just quite hasn't unlocked yet. And you know, back in the day, he was a pretty good fighter in comparison to everyone else around, but as time has gone on, new threats have come around, more games have come out, and he just hasn't quite got to the level of everyone else yet. He will eventually, but at the moment, you know he can still do what he needs to do to get the job done, and he knows this. He's a pretty technical fighter, he understands the game's mechanics in and out, and he understands what he can do and he understands what he can't do. And then you have some people like Tien who are constantly training to understand every single bit of the game. These are the type of players who will always be in the training area, they will always be practicing a combo, they're always going to be on forums looking up the best combo routes, trying to optimize every single part of their gameplay. This is usually because they understand that they used to be pretty good back in the day, but as time has gone on, they've definitely fallen short in comparison to other people who play these games. However, it is in my humble opinion that I believe Tien, out of the 3 Z fighters who are humans, he is definitely the strongest. I don't care what anyone says, this man bodies Krillin any day of the week, Yamcha holds no candle to him. That being said, we have people like Piccolo. I would almost call Piccolo players a mix of both Krillin and Tien, for the sole fact that they are both technical and very efficient with how they fight. And usually these people are the type of people who like to help out the newer players of fighting games a lot of the time, but at the same time, they're not going to sit there and baby them along the way. Think back to the Piccolo and Gohan training, you know what I mean? Or maybe if you're a little bit older, you have a younger sibling, right? And as with most younger siblings who play games, their APM and the way that they handle the game and just process it all much faster than you. They're able to catch on way faster, they're able to do these things a lot better. It's simply mind-blowing. These players would be your Goten and Trunks. They definitely understand the game at its core, but at the same time, they don't really care as much as anyone else does. They're just playing just to play, and somehow they're just a prodigy at it. It just happens to be them who got lucky with it. And lastly, we have the 2 big hitters. Goku and Vegeta. A Goku and Vegeta type player is usually someone who's pretty dominant in the local or in the friend group. They are constantly pushing themselves to be as best as they possibly can, usually always in the lab. If they're not at a local, they're playing online ranked or online casuals. They're just constantly playing the game and constantly trying to get better. And as stated before, while you're Gohan, these two types of players are usually maybe an older sibling or maybe a parent. And to those who've experienced something like this, please do let me know how the experience was. These are the type of players who at some point probably begged their mom for 25 cents, went down to the local liquor store, saw the Street Fighter II Turbo cabinet, saw the local crackhead asking people for a fight, and they thought to themselves, well, you know what, I think I'm pretty good at this game, and then they proceeded to get bodied by a Chun-Li or a Sagat. Truly, a tale as old as time, if you ask me. Time and time and time again, these players have proven themselves to be above and beyond the rest. You can almost see it in their eyes, you know, the battle scars accrued from fighting off so many crackheads that they've beaten at the local liquor store, the calloused fingers from years and years of inputting the Dragon Punch motion, the inability to give up a quarter at the toll booth. And if you look closely into their eyes, you can almost see a reflection of the same fight that happened on such a fateful day, when they weren't even at the arcade machine. They were only there just to get a bag of chips. And all of a sudden, two people got into a spat, all because someone kept hopping full screen with Vega. I'm sure at this point you understand what I mean by everyone in the friend group or at your local is to some degree a Dragon Ball character. And they don't even have to be Dragon Ball related, honestly. Any anime with a big group of people who are all fighters to some degree will always have differing levels of skill that you can always attribute to yourself or to someone that you know. But for the sake of simplicity, I always go with Dragon Ball because who doesn't love Dragon Ball, right? So, throughout Gohan's childhood, he's been through some pretty rough situations that he's made it out of. However, even when he made it out of those situations, he was still banged up pretty bad. And it's not like it was all for nothing. With each fight he got into, while yes, he did get beat up pretty badly, he always proved himself just a little bit more and more each time. In each of those times, he knew that he wasn't exactly strong enough, but deep down, he also knew he couldn't just give up like that, especially when he's on Namek with Krillin and Vegeta. This kid was flying headfirst into every fight that he possibly could. He definitely wasn't putting up Goku numbers, but he was putting up his own little Gohan digits, you know, he was trying his best. And it's also around this time that we're introduced to the Super Saiyan. Vegeta at the time was under the impression that he was the Super Saiyan, and to those who didn't know the future of Dragon Ball at the time, you could believe that because he really was going through people like he was putting up Goku numbers. Until eventually, he himself got bodied and killed. Then once we shift over to the Goku and Frieza fight, we can see that it was actually Goku who had the potential to become a Super Saiyan, and he did. For players in fighting games, becoming a Super Saiyan isn't exactly just, you know, you transform, but more so you level up your gameplay in a sense. And leveling up your gameplay can be a really vague term, but I'll try my best to explain. In some games, when you play for a long time, you get used to doing the same things over and over again. It's almost like an autopilot, if you will. And when you autopilot, you're really just doing whatever has been working because no one stopped you, and that's fine, but you have to push yourself just a little bit further. Even if something is working, it doesn't mean that it can't be improved on, or doesn't mean it can't be refined. Your combo damage and your tech skill and your movement, all that stuff, it can always be refined to the highest of levels. You just need to figure out how to get there. And for a lot of players, this can be a very hard thing to do simply for the fact that how do you level up your gameplay? How does one achieve the next level of gameplay when it comes down to fighting games? This is why I say it's always important to look at your replays, whether they be win or losses. In Tekken 8, when you look at your replays, they give you an option to take control of the character and try to get yourself out of the situation that you found yourself in beforehand that made you lose. And I do really believe that if people truly cared about getting better at fighting games, they would use those kind of tools to really push their gameplay to the next level. Because after a certain point, when it comes down to fighting games, you can't really blame anyone but yourself. There's an uncomfortable accountability in a way you have to take when it comes down to these games. You can't scrub quote your way out of everything because at the end of the day, you should understand what kind of game you're playing and you should understand what you can do and what you can't do. Most, if not every, fighting game has a training area where you can refine your skills. And if you don't use that, then I have to believe that it is simply on you. And while I understand nobody wants to work for their fun, if you're playing a fighting game, you have to understand what you're getting yourself into. You can't just pick up the controller, input a couple of commands, and then think you're gonna go straight to the top. And while that might sound harsh, you have to understand there have been a lot of people in my experience who have said the game is bad or everything else around them is bad, rather than just admitting to themselves that, hey, maybe I could do a little bit better. And what a lot of people don't realize is that it's okay to be bad at something, especially if it's a video game. It's not life or death. And when it comes down to fighting games, if you're bad and you have a drive to get better, that should make you happy. Because you know you now have a reason to put some time into the game, you have a reason to improve, you have a reason to do all the stuff that I said beforehand. And I do believe that there can be a 50-50 situation where a game mechanic is bad and maybe the player is bad. For example, I personally do not like the heat system of Tekken. I barely even like the rage system, but I can live with the rage system. It's the heat system that I don't like. Maybe I just quite haven't understood it properly, but there's something about the heat system that just really bothers me when it comes down to Tekken. And when it comes down to it, I have always been a very defensive heavy player in fighting games, but for Tekken 8, I feel like they promote an aggressive playstyle. And truth be told, I'm just not a good aggressive game player. And while some of the clips playing behind you might tell you a different story, especially with Tekken, most games, I just like to sit back and let you come to me because I know for a fact I can control the pace of battle if I'm smart enough, and I love that. I absolutely love being a defensive player. And with all that being said, that doesn't mean that Tekken 8's heat system and rage system are bad. It just means that me personally, I haven't quite gotten used to using them as efficiently as other people. And there's a lot of fighting game mechanics that a lot of people will agree that are really good, and there's some that a lot of people agree are really bad. And that's the beauty of fighting games to me. If you don't like one fighting game, you can just drop it and go to another. And maybe one day when you decide to give that game a chance, once you've leveled up your gameplay in another game, maybe that level up will carry over into that game that you didn't like beforehand. Fast forward to the Android and Cell saga, and there's a new power to be achieved. Everyone knows that they need to start stepping their game up a lot more. For the player at this point, you'll understand that there's a lot that you need to brush up on and there's a lot that you need to do in order to train to get better. And if you started to play a game with a group of people around the same time, they will also start to notice that their gameplay needs to make a little bit of a level up too. This is why it's also nice to play with a group of people, or at least have some people around your level that you play with pretty frequently. When you win against them, you don't feel like you completely stomped them in, and vice versa, you know what I mean? And obviously when it comes down to it, someone will be better than someone else. However, if the skill levels are not too far apart, you'll have a nice challenge or a rival. That way you can always test out your skills or test out the things that you've learned from various places. For the Z Fighters around this time, they had met another Super Saiyan named Trunks. And Trunks was from a future in where all the Z Fighters had fallen victim to the androids. The Gohan of that timeline trained Trunks and he was also a Super Saiyan, but when it came down to it, he also wasn't strong enough. And with this warning, the Z Fighters understood that they really needed to hunker down and start training. Gohan really started to push himself further and further than he had beforehand, simply because he knew that he had to live up to the expectations of his father, his uncle, and everyone else around him. To the amusement of both Piccolo and Goku, he definitely pushed himself as far as he can go. However, there was something that just wasn't quite clicking with him. He wasn't a Super Saiyan yet. Enter the Hyperbolic Time Chamber. The Hyperbolic Time Chamber is essentially a room where you can spend an entire year in the room, but on the outside it was only a day. Gohan goes into the chamber with his dad and thus begins another training arc. And during this training, he understands that he can't always have people come in and save him or try to get him out by the skin of his teeth. He also starts to trick himself into believing that he can't become a Super Saiyan. This is a huge pitfall that a lot of players might fall into on their journey. They start to doubt themselves a lot and they start to think that maybe it's just kind of pointless to train or do these crazy techniques and maybe they should stop playing. And as someone who used to have that lack of confidence when it came down to fighting games, I believe that it is very hard to get out of that mentality if you don't have the right mindset about it. When it comes down to anything really, you should not hold yourself to anyone else's standards. And what I'm trying to say with that is that you can't always look at a pro player or a player who's a much higher rank than you and expect to be able to do the same things if you've been playing for a long time. Everyone's gears in their head spin at a different pace than anyone else's. It's just how it works. And while you might not be at the level of pro players yet, you should always feel proud about what you've learned up to that point. And in reality, you've definitely learned a lot since you first started. You've learned combos, you've learned matchups, you've learned setups, you've learned all the little small things. And a lot of that stuff, if you were to talk to some random person about it, they would have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. And so to them, you're pretty good. You even start to look at losses a little bit differently. They don't feel like losses, but more so a learning opportunity. If you lost against someone, you can say, well, I just didn't quite know what I was doing, but I can always learn, so for next time, I'll know what to do. I truly believe it is moments like these in the fighting game journey that are the most important and the most defining. And whether you look at these situations with a negative outlook or a positive outlook, you should always, and I mean always, look at them as an opportunity to grow and learn. Yes, a loss might suck, but now you understand what you can do so that way it'll never happen again. And this is where your scholarly side should start to show, because now you understand the small things about your character, you understand a little bit of the intermediate stuff, but you still need a little bit more. And this is where the fighting game community really becomes a community. Whether it be a guide posted on a website, or a character-specific Discord server, or maybe even an extremely long-form video about a character down to the frame data, the fighting game community wants to see a new person succeed. And it might feel like it took a long time, but once you start to really understand how everything works, you start to realize your gameplay is leveling up. You start to realize that every loss that you've taken over the decades of playing these games and every victory that you've had, they all come together to form that one moment where everything truly does fit together and it just clicks.
There, you see? I always knew you had it in you.
You have finally leveled up your gameplay to the next level. You're moving differently, the way you input combos aren't as sloppy, everything you understand about the game just got so much deeper. And these are those moments in fighting games that I absolutely love to see. Think of it like your parents are taking the training wheels off your bike, and they're pushing you, and you're really afraid that you're gonna fall, but then after a certain point, you're just doing it naturally. You don't even realize that they're not pushing you anymore. And it's such a good feeling to know and recognize deep down, because you understand that everything that you were doing up to that point was for something. It was worth it. So after Gohan becomes a Super Saiyan, what was it all for really?
This is an invitation for all of you to attend a little tournament I'll call the Cell Games, to be held in a vacant lot roughly 15 miles to the northwest of this station. It'll be like your World Martial Arts tournament, except we'll fight in teams. Me versus all of you. As many challengers as you'd like, one-on-one until the winner is determined.
The Cell Games at this point was where we got to see just how much Goku and Gohan really grew in the hyperbolic time chamber. And as for the player, the Cell Games can be looked at as your first big major, if you will. Or maybe not even a major, but just a local tournament that you're really excited for. Now, you might be feeling a flurry of emotions when it comes down to the idea of going to a big tournament, but that's completely normal. You're gonna be going up against a different type of player than usual. And the biggest factor about that is the fact that you're not within the comfort of your own home anymore, or your own setup, on top of the fact that a lot of these people you're just not really familiar with. And I know earlier I stated that the FGC wants to see the newer people succeed. However, in tournament settings, while they do want to see newer players succeed, they're not going there to be a helper. They're going there to win. But so are you. You understand that all these people are there for the same goal and they have the same thing in mind. They all want to win. And sometimes they might not show it, but a lot of the people there are feeling the exact same way you're feeling too. A lot of people are feeling the pre-tournament nerves set in at this point. A lot of people are a little clammy-handed, a little shaky-fingered. It's normal. It happens to everyone. However, as you play more and more tournaments, you start to get used to the feeling of being in that hot seat. The connection between the Cell Games and the player can be a lot of different things, but I'll try to break them down. For the player, Cell can be a number of things. He can represent a player you want to beat, a roadblock you want to get over, or maybe a personal goal that you set for yourself that you're really trying to achieve. And these Cell games is a perfect place for you to try to overcome that goal, or really try to test yourself to see just exactly how good and how far you've come in fighting games. And even if you end up losing in your tournament round, you should never feel bad because, again, look at all the people around you. You have no idea how long these people have been playing games for, you have no idea how much they've been training, you simply just don't know. And even if it's your first tournament, you should still feel very proud of yourself because look at you, you're out here competing with the big dogs. And that fact alone should fill you with so much confidence that you don't even care if you lose because again, losing isn't exactly a loss, but more so a learning experience. Even after the matches, you can always ask someone, hey, where did I mess up? Or hey, do you have any tips for me for the future? And if most of these people are socially lubricated, they will have absolutely no problem telling you tips and tricks on how you can improve your gameplay. However, you might come across some bad apples who are just basement dwellers and they just don't really understand how to interact with people, but that's fine, that's normal. But just know, next time, you got them. When Gohan and Cell initially faced off, a lot of people in the crowd were like, there's absolutely no way that Gohan should be able to do this. However, everyone didn't quite understand just how far Gohan had come along in his training, and similar with you, a lot of people might sleep on you, and that can form a little bit of a buildup of pressure, but again, it could be your first tournament, or it could be the first one that you're really trying to win, so you really shouldn't let it get to you that badly. As time goes on, you'll get used to it. As for Gohan, he definitely understood that he could win, but at a huge cost. Ever since he was a kid, everyone has always known that Gohan has had a hidden potential deep down inside, and when he's in the heat of battle, that potential usually comes to the surface. And when Cell figures this out, he tries his absolute best to get it out of him by any means necessary. Now, I'm not saying that Cell, or whatever your Cell might be, is going to sit here and threaten your friends at gunpoint, but there might come a moment where you enter a flow state. Everything on the outside world just doesn't even matter anymore. The only thing that matters is you, the game, and your opponent. There might come a moment where you might do something extremely sick, and everyone watching might go, whoa, that was really cool, I wonder how they did that. But you yourself don't even know how you did it because you're in the state of flow. You're not really thinking about everything that's going on, you're more so feeling it. And I have to be honest with you guys, it's extremely hard to describe what it's like to be in that moment, simply because when you're in it, you don't really know that you're in it, but it's more so afterwards you become a little bit self-aware of like, oh yeah, I didn't really notice that. It's almost the opposite of a blind rage. You know when you have those gym bros who always go on saying, oh, I just see red. Well, think of this as seeing blue. Everything just becomes clear and you understand what you need to do in order to secure the victory. And when you finally defeat whatever your Cell is, or maybe you finally overcame that roadblock or you achieved that goal, that's it. You've done it. You started off as a goofy little button masher who didn't know anything about the game to a little fledgling fighter who knew a little bit. And now you finally, after all that hard work and effort, finally you've won yourself a tournament. Around this time for a lot of players, maybe you've stopped playing fighting games altogether. You've experienced what you consider the peak of fighting games, and now maybe you've decided to go and play some other games, or maybe you just decided to put games down for a little bit. You're getting older, you got more responsibilities, and maybe you just don't have enough time to put into the lab for training your combos and all that stuff. And this is where I believe the connection between the player and Gohan can differ. While you can still be a Gohan, you can also still have an interest in fighting games. You can make it your mainstay thing, like Vegeta, or Piccolo, or maybe Goku in the other world. But for Gohan at this time, he was more so focused on his scholarly studies. He started going to school, he was meeting new people, trying new things, and he kinda had a little girlfriend at the time. It's very natural as you get older to start accumulating a little bit of rust on your joints when it comes down to fighting games and all that. A few years back, I used to play a lot of Super Smash Bros. Melee, and I would consider myself to be pretty decent at it with the characters that I used. But in later years, I kinda stopped playing a little bit, and because of that, when I do go back to play, I'm not as good as I used to be. And it's only natural because obviously I'm not keeping up with the game as much as I used to. However, I can still understand the basics and the fundamentals of everything that I had learned up until that point. And as I said before, everyone's gears turn differently in their head, so maybe you aren't the same as me. However, when it comes down to it, naturally, a lot of people will have a little bit of skill loss when it comes down to fighting games and not playing them for a while. But if you did continue to play a lot of fighting games and you're very well integrated into the fighting game community, you might notice a little something interesting. The fighting game community is filled with a lot of, how do you say, eccentric personalities, myself included, of course.
Uppercut from Poke Chop.
Somebody call Shine right now. Call Shine because I don't know who this is.
I can't believe what Shine just... He broke... He broke the headphones? He broke...
Ryan's out of there. Can he come back?
Hell no.
That sucks.
Another one. I bet you won't do it again. Finds the hit.
Mix up time, mix up time, mix up time!
Oh, the delay up kick. Look at King with his face.
Yes! Oh my fucking god! Oh my god! Oh my fucking god!
Don't you ever get fucking...
I thought it was gonna be one more. I thought it was gonna be one more.
Event. I made this shit happen, bitch! Don't you ever!
Stop that. Same thing again, K-Brad. Let's go. 1-0. We done? Is that it? Who sucks? Number 3 on the list, you. Number 2, you. Number 1, you. US.
Let me see this.
Tell him about himself. Tell him about himself. Tell him about himself.
Let him know.
Tell him. Tell him about himself. Talk to him. Tell him about himself. Tell him about himself. That's what I like to see.
Think of it as your persona when you play fighting games. I believe it was a player Cuddlecore who would liken the FGC to a cookout, a music concert, and something else I can't remember off the top of my head. And if I had to pick my own 3 things to liken the FGC to, I would also probably pick a cookout, a WWE match, and an anime. I say these 3 things because, in my experience, the love and welcoming feeling that you get at an FGC event is unlike any other when it comes down to it. Everyone wants to have fun, everyone just wants to hang out and chill, and everyone's super friendly with each other. But then when it comes down to the matches, you could have the one quiet kid who sits in the back of the class get on the sticks, and all of a sudden he becomes Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Or you could have someone beat that same guy and he clutches his heart like he's Goku, or he clutches his arm like he's Vegeta and he goes down. It's crazy. These people have so many different layers of personality to them and you would never know, but when it comes down to a fighting game, those events bring out those layers in people. They make people blossom into the person that they want to be, and they don't have to feel judged for it. And even if you don't feel the need to change up your personality or have a persona about you, you honestly don't even need to. You can go up and be yourself, play whoever you want to, and if you even tried to, in the end, people still love you either way. And I say all this mainly because around this point for Gohan, he noticed that he needed to fight crime in his city. However, he wanted to keep his identity a secret, and thus he came up with the persona Great Saiyan Man. Even though the people around him, when they first saw and heard the idea, they didn't quite understand, they thought it was goofy. Gohan didn't mind any. Outside of Goten, I would say Gohan was his own biggest fan when he was in that mask. And honestly, that's how you should be when it comes down to this too. The entity that is the FGC has so many different types of personalities that clash and mix that I feel like the rivalries that you see play out in front of you can actually be akin to a Goku and Vegeta type rivalry. In fact, the rivalry between Goku and Vegeta was so fierce that when Goku was allowed to come back to life for a day, they all signed up for the next big world tournament, and Vegeta himself decided that he was also going to go into the tournament. All of this makes Gohan realize that he needs to start brushing the rust coat off of himself, and thus he starts training with his little brother. During this time, he gets to see and understand just how far along Goten is, and he also teaches his girlfriend how to fly. And then comes the day of the tournament, where everything's fine and dandy until Piccolo feels out the energy of a deity, and then he gets a little spooked. He doesn't fight, and then that same deity says, hey everyone, listen, there's gonna be a monstrous evil coming to destroy you guys if you don't listen to me. Listening to that deity then leads to Gohan's girlfriend getting beat up, Gohan's energy getting sapped, Vegeta becoming evil again, a bunch of people dying, and then Gohan getting almost blasted into outer space. Now, I understand as a fighting game player, a lot of that's going to be extremely hard to relate to, but just hang in there. After nearly getting blasted into outer space, he eventually is teleported to the planet of the Kais, and on the planet of the Kais, he undergoes a ritual which unlocks all of his hidden potential. He didn't exactly have to do any physical training that much, but he did have to sit through a long process of having someone point their hands at him, and I'm not too sure the logistics of it, but that somehow was able to unlock all of his power. And for a short time, our boy was the strongest in the series. It doesn't last too long, but at some point, he was definitely the strongest. And then the power of the pen came and just took over. I'm not too sure what would be considered a ritual to unlock all of a fighting game player's skill that's been hidden over the years, but the closest thing I can relate it to is overcoming a mental block that you might have, or overcoming some kind of personal issue that you might have affecting you on the sticks. In my earlier days of fighting games, embarrassingly enough, I used to equate my self-worth and my confidence to fighting games because I used to play them so much. Anytime I would lose or I would get hit by something that I should have known to block or to do a certain interaction with, I would always blame myself in such a harsh way. It was very self-destructive. And as stated before, it can be really hard to get yourself out of those kind of mental traps when it comes down to fighting games. If you have a good support system around, definitely use them. They're there to support you and they love you and they want to see you succeed. Once you get out of that mental trap or overcome that personal hurdle that's been holding you back for all those years in fighting games, you will be able to become such a powerful player when it comes down to these games. It'll amaze you. I'm sure it'll amaze the people around you to see how far you've come. And just like with Gohan, I'm sure your potential will be absolutely unlimited. You just need to make sure you're using the people and resources around you. And with all that being said, I believe that the average fighting game player journey can go anywhere at this point, really. And with all the experience that you've accumulated over the time of playing, really you can be any kind of player that you want to be or have any kind of playstyle that you want to have. Truly the deciding factor is just you. As with Gohan, I'm sure I could go into a lot more depth about his journeys through Super and how he becomes a little bit of a side character, but for the sake of this video, we're going to stop at the Buu saga because I believe that's where really he could have taken off and gone in any direction. And while yes, he does get his respective power boost, we're not going to go too much into that. At that point, that would be you hitting the pro level, and that's not out of the realm of possibility. However, you need to work for it. Gohan didn't exactly work for it, he more so just got pushed into it. Fighting games will make a lot of people feel a lot of different feelings, but the one feeling that you should always have with fighting games is the feeling of fun. Winning, losing, learning, it should always be a fun experience. Because again, at the end of the day, it's just a game really. I love fighting games. I love everything about fighting games. The characters, the designs, the stages, the music, everything that encompasses a fighting game, you will always see me praising it. And if you're watching this and you've never played a fighting game but now you want to, I'm sure the question in your head is, well, where do I start? And the answer to that really, anywhere, honestly. There are so many, and I mean so many fighting games that are alike and different at the same time that I wouldn't really be able to tell someone in good conscience where to start off their journey because it's exactly that. It's their journey. It's your journey. And when you first start playing these games, maybe you're a little afraid, and that's okay. So long as you tried and put a little bit of effort into trying to learn how to play, and you decide, well, maybe it's not for me, that's okay too, because at least you know you tried, and that's all that should ever matter, is the fact that you know you tried to do something new, and you know deep down, maybe it's just not for you. Maybe a lot of people don't have the same passion as I do, or maybe you just don't feel the same way as other people feel about fighting games, but you know it was all up to you, and you took the plunge, and you can officially say that you tried to play these games. And if you don't think anyone cares about you trying to play these games, I care. I care immensely. That's the whole reason why this video exists in the first place. Other than the fact that I kept yapping to my loved ones about fighting games, I'm sure they were getting tired of it, I want newer players to understand that it's okay to fail and it's okay to be bad at these games because you will always be able to have room for improvement. self-refinement and self-optimization on the sticks is something that is very important to me when it comes down to these kinds of games. This has been Gil Heaney talking to you about the journey of fighting games, and I hope you have a fantastic day, night, evening, and the rest of your life. Thanks for watching, homie.